The hum of the twin-engine Cessna vibrated beneath me, a low, steady reassurance as the Florida coastline slipped past the windshield in streaks of orange and gold. My hands gripped the yoke, knuckles white, because I knew every moment could be my last in the air. Something wasn't right. There was a static in the comms, a twitch in the autopilot system, but it wasn't mechanical. It was human. Tower, 925 Charlie, you copy? My voice trembled slightly, betraying the calm I forced in my chest. Silence. I glanced at the flight plan clipped to the dashboard, Jacksonville to Orlando, organs for transplant. Vital cargo, a heartbeat away from saving lives. And then, a ping. My phone. A text from my HOA president, Marlene Winters, we need to talk. Now. About your license. I froze. Marlene wasn't the type to send texts at 6:15 a.m. She was the type who preferred face-to-face accusations, usually over a latte at the community cafe, always surrounded by the symphony of passive-aggressive neighbors. And she had a daughter, Grace, delicate, fragile, sick enough to require a transplant. I should have ignored it. I should have focused on the cockpit, on the engines. But curiosity is a dangerous thing at 20,000 feet. By the time we landed, my stomach was in knots. The runway lights stretched behind me like the teeth of some waiting predator. Ground crew waved me in, but all I could think of was Marlene's message. Back on terra firma, the tension followed me like a shadow. I parked the plane in the hangar and stepped into the heat, the Florida sun burning off the morning mist. A neighbor approached, clipboard in hand. Hey, Marcus. HOA board meeting tonight. Heard something about your license? You okay? Yeah, I said, forcing a grin. But the knot in my chest didn't loosen. My commercial pilot license, suspended? The words tasted like ash. The morning passed in a blur of calls. FAA number. On hold. Minutes stretched into hours. When they finally answered, the voice on the other end was clinical, almost bored. Mr. Lane, your license has been suspended pending investigation. There's a complaint filed by your HOA. I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. Marlene. Of course. I ended the call, pacing the empty hangar. Engines hummed faintly in the background, as if mocking me. I tried to piece together why, what could Marlene possibly gain? I'd flown for her daughter before. Saved lives. There had to be a mistake. Then I noticed it. A subtle, almost imperceptible scratch along the edge of the flight log desk. It wasn't there yesterday. Nor the faint smear of red, too deep to be paint, too subtle to be rust. Grace's blood? My mind raced. Suddenly, a sound, the front gate clicking open. Too soft to be the neighbor's usual morning chatter. I froze. Someone was watching. My instincts screamed at me, but logic struggled to catch up. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through the contacts, but realized I couldn't call anyone without alerting whoever was there. A shadow moved across the hangar wall. A human silhouette, careful, deliberate. Not threatening yet. I stepped forward. Marlene? I called, voice steady despite the adrenaline. No answer. Just the faint echo of my own heartbeat bouncing off the concrete walls. I circled the hangar, eyes darting to every corner, every shadowed nook. Nothing. And yet, something was undeniably off. A subtle rearrangement of boxes, a missing toolbox, the faint smell of antiseptic lingering in the air. Then I found it, a manila envelope taped under the pilot seat of my plane. Trembling, I pulled it out. Inside, a single sheet of paper, stop flying. Or your license and your conscience will pay the price. My hands shook. A threat? Or a warning? My mind screamed, trying to connect dots that weren't yet visible. This wasn't about FAA regulations or flight logs. This was personal. Outside, the sun climbed higher, the heat suffocating. But the chill running down my spine refused to leave. My heart hammered as I imagined Marlene's perfect neighborhood, her perfect life, hiding something darker. And I realized I'd been lured here to notice the subtle traps, the quiet manipulations. By the time I got back to my apartment, my mind was a whirlwind of suspicion. Calls to friends, colleagues, all fruitless. The envelope's threat echoed in my ears: stop flying. Stop saving lives. Or face ruin. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the morning light fracture against the blinds. My phone buzzed again. Another text, from Marlene: Grace needs you. But rules are rules. Rules. Or leverage. I ran my hands through my hair, thinking, calculating. Something was very wrong. And it wasn't just about my license. Whoever was behind this had access, knowledge, patience. And possibly, a plan that extended far beyond the HOA. Outside, life continued in oblivious normalcy. Children rode bikes, sprinklers hissed, and the smell of coffee drifted from open windows. But inside, the trap had been set. And I was already inside it. I didn't know it yet, but the next flight wouldn't just test my skill as a pilot. It would test my ability to survive the quiet war being waged against me, one letter, one shadow, one manipulated rule at a time. And somewhere, Marlene's daughter, fragile and innocent, waited at the center of it all. The smell of wet asphalt clung to the morning as I returned to the hangar, determined to find answers. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that wouldn't settle. The envelope had been a warning, but warnings always hide something deeper. And I intended to uncover it. I crouched beside the Cessna, flashlight cutting through the shadows beneath the fuselage. Every panel, every bolt, every inch of wiring became a potential clue. My training as a pilot taught me to notice subtle anomalies, to sense patterns where most saw chaos. Tonight, I needed every ounce of that skill. The logbook had been moved, pages slightly out of order. Flight times didn't match the digital transponder records. Someone had intimate access, to my routines. My heartbeat spiked. Whoever it was, they weren't just a meddling neighbor, this was calculated. I scanned the hangar perimeter through the night vision camera I kept in my flight bag, old tech, but reliable. That's when I saw it, tire tracks, too fresh, leading toward the back gate. I traced them with my flashlight, careful not to disturb anything. The tracks ended abruptly, as if the vehicle had vanished into thin air. Impossible. And yet, there it was, evidence someone had been there, had watched me, had infiltrated my life. By the time I returned to my apartment, my mind was spinning. I needed information, allies. First step, FAA. I had to know exactly what Marlene, or whoever was behind this, had claimed. The phone call earlier had been vague, procedural. I needed documentation. I pored over the PDFs of my flight records, comparing timestamps, cross-referencing logs. Slowly, patterns emerged. Discrepancies aligned suspiciously with times Marlene had emailed or texted. One flight, one organ transfer, had been flagged, but not for a mechanical reason. No. Someone had created a paper trail, a digital shadow painting me as negligent, reckless, a danger. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about a license. This was sabotage. And it was personal. Next, I needed to understand Marlene's motive. Her daughter, Grace, was delicate, on life support waiting for a transplant. But the more I dug into community chatter, medical notes, and charity events, a subtle narrative emerged: desperate parents sometimes make desperate moves. Could she be manipulating me to control who flew for her daughter? Or worse, covering a darker secret? I followed the threads to the hospital records, accessed through a secure login I'd kept from a past volunteer stint. Dates aligned with my flights. One entry stood out: Grace's condition had worsened suspiciously after a shipment delay of the previous month. Not enough to raise alarms publicly, but enough for someone to notice. It clicked: every suspension, every threat, every text wasn't arbitrary. It was orchestrated to corner me, to ensure I complied with her rules. My stomach churned. The person who had once seemed a neighborly, concerned mother now appeared as a puppeteer with invisible strings. I returned to the hangar that evening, under the pretense of inspecting the plane. The envelope had vanished. In its place, another note, taped under the same seat, but different handwriting. You see, Marcus. The game has begun. My pulse accelerated. Whoever was behind this wasn't just threatening, they were teasing, playing with my psyche. I needed allies. I reached out to my fellow pilots, discreetly, framing it as a procedural issue with FAA filings. Most were sympathetic but cautious. No one wanted to cross a powerful HOA president. Only one, Elena Torres, former investigative reporter turned private consultant, agreed to meet. We met in a dimly lit diner. Neon signs flickered, casting a pinkish glow across the booths. She studied me with sharp eyes, notebook open. You're being set up, she said bluntly. Not an accident. Not bureaucratic error. Someone is weaponizing bureaucracy against you. And it smells like personal leverage. I swallowed, my throat dry. Marlene? You think she's doing this? Her gaze sharpened. I think she's the face you see. The real player could be anyone with access to medical records, flight schedules, and a vendetta. But she's a convenient front. People underestimate the quiet ones who hide behind community boards. We spent hours mapping out my movements, past flights, her daughter's hospital schedule. A conspiracy grid emerged, subtle but undeniable, threats timed with flight approvals, envelope warnings coinciding with organ transports, license suspension shadowing critical transplant windows. Someone's making sure you obey, Elena said, voice low, urgent. And if you don't? Collateral damage. The word echoed in my mind, collateral. Grace. Other lives I carried in the cargo hold of my plane. The weight of responsibility tightened like a noose. By midnight, we had evidence, but no concrete identity beyond Marlene. Every lead twisted back to her, but it was too perfect, too curated. A maze designed to trap me while keeping her hands clean. I left the diner, the cold night air biting at my face. Somewhere out there, someone was watching, calculating my next move. The trap had widened. I wasn't just a pilot anymore, I was a pawn in a quiet, deadly game. And as I climbed back into my apartment, scanning the streets below, I realized the next move had to be precise. I couldn't just react. I had to investigate, gather evidence, and anticipate the enemy. The rising threat wasn't just a suspension or a note under a seat. It was a shadow stretching across my life, reaching for everything I valued. And every tick of the clock brought me closer to a confrontation I hadn't yet fully imagined, but one I couldn't escape. The community center was packed, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, folding chairs squeaking as neighbors murmured and shuffled papers. It was HOA night, the perfect stage. I knew Marlene would use it to present her version of events, and I needed to be ready. Evidence in hand, I entered cautiously, scanning the room. Cameras, smartphones, friendly faces, curious eyes, every one of them a potential witness or weapon. Marlene stood at the podium, impeccably dressed, her daughter Grace sitting beside her, fragile and pale under the harsh lighting. We're here tonight to address community concerns regarding Mr. Lane, she began, her voice smooth, rehearsed, carrying that subtle edge of authority only years of manipulating neighbors could perfect. Safety is our priority. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. My stomach tightened. I couldn't let her control the narrative. Not here. Not now. I stepped forward. With all due respect, the safety concerns are manufactured. My voice cut through the murmurs like a scalpel. I unfolded the first piece of evidence, FAA documentation showing flight logs had been tampered with, emails and timestamps proving interference. The crowd shifted, a ripple of surprise moving through them. Marlene's smile faltered, just slightly. A twitch in her eye betrayed her calm facade. Mr. Lane, she said, voice still smooth but colder now. Are you suggesting I'm behind this? I held the envelope up. Yes. And this. I revealed the series of threatening notes, timestamped to match flight schedules and critical transplant windows. This isn't bureaucracy. It's manipulation. It's a personal vendetta masked as concern. A woman in the front row gasped. Children clutched parents' hands. Phones started recording. The quiet tension of the room erupted into low chatter, whispers turning to outright questioning. Marlene's composure began to crumble. "You don't understand," her voice quivered, faltering mid-sentence. Grace shifted uncomfortably, eyes wide, sensing the shift in her mother. I stepped closer, calm but precise, every word a blade. "I understand perfectly. You've weaponized the system to control me, to ensure you get what you want for Grace. And now, everyone can see it." The room erupted. People demanded explanations, pulled out phones, murmured about ethics, legality, deception. The power had shifted. Marlene's calculated poise faltered under the public pressure. Then the sudden twist, Marlene lunged for her phone, pressing a button I hadn't anticipated. The lights flickered and died. Panic surged. Chairs scraped across the floor, children cried. And in the darkness, a soft, mechanical hum echoed through the room. Smoke filled the corners. My instincts screamed. I dove toward the source, a hidden speaker rigged to trigger an alarm if I moved too close. I kicked it away, exposing a small recording device, wires snaking under the podium. A trap meant to discredit me as dangerous, perhaps criminal, if anyone had seen the sparks. Elena's voice cut through my comms. "Marcus, secure the evidence. They're escalating." I grabbed the FAA documents, the envelopes, my phone with timestamps. Adrenaline surged. Marlene's face twisted in fury. "You'll ruin everything. Grace. She doesn't deserve to be a pawn in this," I shouted, stepping into the light. Every eye in the room bore down on her. The veil of perfection shattered. For the first time, her daughter looked directly at her mother and whispered, "Mom?" The innocence in Grace's voice was a hammer to the façade Marlene had maintained. I held my ground, calm amidst chaos, as neighbors began to chant, question, demand accountability. Marlene tried to regain control, but it was too late. The evidence was public. Her manipulation exposed. And then it happened, a sudden, precise action twist. A man in a black jacket appeared at the rear exit, opening the door to the outside. A gust of wind carried a black envelope, similar to the ones I'd received, into the room. Everyone froze. I grabbed it. Inside, a photograph of Grace in a hospital bed, with someone else unknown hovering nearby. A new player had entered the game. Marlene's eyes widened, terror finally breaking through her composure. "No, you don't understand." I cut her off. "I understand enough. There's someone bigger than you behind this. And they're still out there." Police sirens wove into the chaos, called by neighbors who had witnessed the threats. The community, once passive, now demanded justice. Marlene was restrained, her authority evaporated, leaving her trembling and exposed. The crowd's focus shifted, half in relief, half in awe. I took a breath, knowing this wasn't the end. The immediate danger had been neutralized, but the shadow looming over Grace and over me remained. Outside, the night was heavy with anticipation. Cameras flashed, voices carried into the street, the community buzzing with revelation. But one detail lingered in my mind, the black envelope, the photograph, the implication that Marlene was only a front, a piece in a much larger puzzle. Elena joined me outside, voice low, urgent. "This isn't over. Whoever sent that, they're patient, smart, and they've been waiting for someone like you to act. Next time, it could be more than notes or threats. It could be lives." I nodded, hands gripping the envelope tightly. The confrontation had been won. Publicly, at least. But privately, the game had only begun. And somewhere, in the dark corners of power and manipulation, the true architect of this conspiracy watched, calculating the next move. The community had seen the villain crumble. But I had glimpsed the shadow behind the shadow. And it wasn't done. The morning after the HOA confrontation was eerily quiet. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the apartment floor. The city outside moved on as if nothing had happened, but for me, everything had changed. Marlene was in custody, her carefully curated life exposed, her lies stripped bare. Grace was safe for now, but the photograph from the black envelope haunted my thoughts. I poured coffee, the aroma barely cutting through the tension in my chest. My phone buzzed with messages, neighbors expressing relief, colleagues checking in, Elena sending her usual terse analysis. Cleanup complete, for now. But shadows remain, her text read. I ran a hand over the evidence sprawled across my kitchen table, the FAA logs, the envelopes, the timestamps, the photos. Each piece a puzzle, each a clue pointing to someone far more dangerous than Marlene. Someone who had orchestrated every move from the shadows, manipulating both me and her, ensuring compliance without ever revealing themselves. The city's hum felt different now, louder, sharper. Every siren, every honking horn, every passing conversation could be a signal. The paranoia was subtle but insistent. I realized that while the immediate danger had ended, the unseen threat had only grown stronger. I decided to visit Grace at the hospital. She lay in her bed, a fragile bundle of life, her breathing shallow but steady. Her mother's absence was obvious, but there was a calm on the nurses' faces, a sense that the immediate storm had passed. Grace smiled weakly when she saw me. "You saved me," she whispered, voice faint. I knelt beside her bed, taking her hand. "No, Grace. You're stronger than anyone. I just helped a little." The moment was fleeting. Behind her, the medical monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm that reminded me of every flight I'd ever taken, every life I'd carried through turbulence. I knew then that my role as a pilot wasn't just about flying, it was about vigilance, about being prepared for the invisible threats that always lurked beyond the horizon. Back at my apartment, I compiled all the evidence into a secure folder. I wanted to be ready for the next attack, the next manipulation. The black envelope had proven that Marlene was only a pawn, a face for a more calculating mind. Whoever orchestrated this had patience, access, and a willingness to exploit innocence for power. I tried to reach Elena, but her phone went straight to voicemail. A sense of urgency pricked at me. The game wasn't over. Whoever was behind this had likely anticipated my every move so far. That evening, I returned to the hangar. The Cessna gleamed under the dim lights, engines silent but poised. I ran my hands along the fuselage, the subtle scratches from previous intrusions still visible. My mind replayed the threats, the black envelopes, the manipulated schedules. Someone was always watching, always calculating. Then I saw it, a small, unmarked van parked across the lot. No lights, no movement. Just presence. My pulse quickened. Through the van's tinted windows, a shadow shifted. Not enough to identify, just enough to confirm my fear: someone had returned. I didn't approach. Instead, I recorded it, documented it, and retreated. Every precaution mattered now. The immediate crisis was over, but the war had only just begun. Later that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, mind racing. Marlene's defeat was satisfying, but hollow. The true enemy remained invisible, orchestrating events from a distance. I understood now: vigilance wasn't just part of being a pilot. It was survival. And survival required anticipation, cunning, and nerves of steel. A faint vibration in my phone broke the silence. I picked it up. No message, no call. Just a photograph. Grace, smiling this time, but in the background, barely noticeable, a figure standing in the shadows, watching. I swallowed hard. Whoever this was, they hadn't moved a pawn, they had set the board, and the game was far from over. Outside, the city lights twinkled, indifferent. The streets buzzed with life. But in the quiet corners, in the spaces between the ordinary, I knew the shadow waited. Patient. Silent. Dangerous. And I would be ready.